Hey, great to have you here. So back today with another horror review video. And this one on Halloween, why not? We're gonna take a look at Trick or Treat. So this is one that came out, I think in around 2007. So a little bit after my time as far as having a really strong nostalgia for this film. So it's one that I don't have a lot of personal interest in, but I know it's a really popular film amongst a lot of fans. Its memorabilia is everywhere. If you go to a Spirit of Halloween, for example, you see Trick or Treat, Sam stuff all over the place. So it's definitely a beloved Halloween film, and I could see maybe for some good reasons. So if I'm being honest, I hadn't watched this film pretty much ever until last year. I gave it a watch. Watching it the first time then, I didn't have that nostalgic vibe for it, and if I'm being honest, I didn't love the film. So I expected going into this review, watching it a second time, not to like the film and probably give it somewhere in a below average review score. So that was my thoughts going in. Upon second watch, I think I liked the film a lot more. I'm not sure what it was that clicked a little bit better this time. Maybe I knew what was coming and knew kind of the timeline of expectations as far as multiple stories. I think upon first watch, the multiple stories wasn't something I liked a lot, whereas upon second watch, I feel like it's definitely a strength of the film and provides some variety despite not necessarily having one direction. As I mentioned in other reviews, definitely like to keep an open mind as far as changing my thoughts on how I perceive a film and how I view it as far as the score goes. So overall, definitely enjoyed it this time a lot more. Sam himself is a big aspect of Trick or Treat. Looking into his background, it sounds like he's a demonic being that kind of enforces the rules of Halloween. His name is actually derived from Samhain, which is like the Gaelic festival that inspired Halloween. Makes sense kind of having that origin for Sam himself. Some of the logic that it didn't make a whole lot of sense, I think, upon first watch. After getting some more information as far as to what Sam's motives are, it makes more sense and it's more enjoyable as a film, understanding why he's doing this, why he's not doing certain things. Because, for example, there's times where he doesn't kill somebody, there's times where he does. And it's really because he's living out the Halloween spirit and enforcing the rules of Halloween in his eyes, not necessarily just trying to kill everybody. He's just trying to make sure Halloween gets observed correctly as far as he sees it. So there's like a bunch of rules he follows. Always wear a costume, pass out treats to trick-or-treaters, never blow out a jack-o'-lantern before midnight, always check your candy is one of them. That it's not really he's got to kill somebody, but it's just his rules. Respect the dead, never take down your decorations before November 1st, and then we have never hurt the innocent. So those are kind of the rules that he lives by, and it makes sense when he does certain things, knowing that as his backstory. Trick or Treat really follows 5 different paths, as I mentioned. I'll go into more detail, but if you want a high-level view, you have a woman who's really not following the rules as far as blowing out a jack-o'-lantern early in the movie. You have a principal who's doing really creepy stuff in his personal life. You have an old man who's just not interested in Halloween, living next door to him. And then you have a group of kids who are like pulling pranks on another kid. And then you have a woman who's trying to get laid, if you will. She's with her group of sisters or friends, and they're kind of just doing their own thing. So that's kind of the backstory as far as the 5 groups. And their paths cross and the timelines change throughout. So that is something that I enjoyed upon second watch. We start the film off with the couple coming home. So it looks like they just came from a Halloween party. They're in costumes. The wife's asking, let's take down the decorations. The husband's like, no, let's just go inside. So he goes in and like turns on a movie and falls asleep. I don't know what his logic didn't make a whole lot of sense, but he leaves her to go out there to take up the decorations. I guess maybe it sounded like her mom was coming the following day or something. So she doesn't want to have the decorations up because she's not a big Halloween person. She's out doing that, and while her husband's asleep, she gets attacked and killed. Her husband comes out when he wakes up from his sleep when the movie's over, comes out trying to find her, and he sees her dead there. So that just kicks things off with the wife dying and the husband freaking out. So then we cut to like a changing room where there's a kid snooping on these girls changing, which is a little bit edgy. I will say this. I'm not really sure who Trick or Treat is targeted towards. I kind of want to say teenagers or something along those lines because I feel like it's kind of pitched as a kid's movie, but there's a lot of edgy stuff here that I'm not sure kids would be really targeted with. So it's a little bit adult as well. So it's kind of that weird middle ground where it's not really for either group as far as kids or adults. It's kind of for some kind of blended mix of the two. Just not really sure who that's really targeting. You have the kid who's spying on the girls changing, and they come out and they're dressed up like as princesses, and the one girl's in like a Little Red Riding Hood costume. They're checking out, and they're kind of giving this one girl in the Little Red Riding Hood costume a lot of grief. It sounds like she does not have a lot of success with guys, and one of the girls is like, hey, watch this, and she invites some guy to the party that when she's checking out. Then we cut to a different group, and here's kind of the issue with the pacing if you haven't seen the film before. We cut to the kid knocking pumpkins over, this kind of heavier kid. He goes up and he's gonna mess with the jack-o'-lantern at this one house, and he sees this creepy guy who's like, hey, don't do that. Comes up and sits beside him. So it seems like they're pretty friendly. The guy gives the kid some candy, and eventually you see the kid like can't speak, and he winds up like puking out a bunch of chocolate and blood. It's just kind of this gross colored mess. So we find out that the principal put a blade in his candy bars. So that's kind of the old adage, like check your candy bars because you're gonna put blades in them. I don't know how widespread of an issue that really was, but I remember that being something mentioned growing up that, hey, this happens to some people, which is super messed up. But the kid winds up dying there and like falls on the guy's lap. The part I didn't really understand here as far as the con goes, and I'll talk about this again later, but the kid dies. It's like mid trick-or-treating night, so nobody notices that this kid died. Nobody's like going down the street and sees it happening. He just winds up like pulling out a lollipop and he's like, all right, let's go. So he brings the kid inside, and then we cut to him in the backyard where he's burying two people. Presumably one of them's the kid and one of them's somebody else that he got earlier in the night. He's making a lot of noise back there, and there's like a dog who's barking at him. He cuts off like a finger of one of the people, throws it, and the dog goes and chases it. And the neighbor comes out who owns the dog. You see a kid kind of wake up that he's like burying, and you hear it making some noise. I don't know. I assume this was the second kid because we later see what happened to the first kid. But I don't get why the kid's not like actually talking. He's kind of just murmuring. Maybe his mouth's taped shut. We don't really know. But he winds up getting whacked by the principal, and the kid winds up dying there. You get a little backstory here where the guy mentions about his wife being dead. So it sounds like it's just him. And he has a son that he takes care of who's like yelling at him from in the house, which is kind of funny too because he's trying to bury this person and he's trying to like talk to the kid. And we cut to him going inside, and you get the vibe that he's gonna like kill his son because he's very irritated by him. He really just wants to do his own thing. And he goes down the stairs and he grabs a knife, and we see the kid there and he stabs something. And then we kind of pause and we're like, oh, did he kill his son? And we're like, oh, no, he didn't. So we're like, oh, maybe he was carving a pumpkin. But turns out we see the kid who got killed by the razor blades earlier. His head is there, and they're like carving his head. So a little messed up. It's kind of a twist surprise where you think maybe he's going to kill his son, but then you're like, oh, no, he's not. They're just having bonding time. But then you see they're bonding over the head of this other dead kid. So super messed up that that's kind of what they're doing together. Definitely left to believe the one in the backyard that was making noise is probably the second kid, not the one that was there, because obviously his head was cut off, so he's not going to be making any noise. Then we cut to the kids trick-or-treating at the house, which kind of adds to my point of there would definitely have been people outside, but they ring his doorbell and he just pretty much sends them on their way. Then we cut to the group of kids moving to another house, and they're seeing like this sex party or something happening in the background of this one house, and they're like super weirded out by it. But you get a little bit more dialogue between the kid group, and they run into a nerdy girl who's like dressed in a witch outfit, and she has like tons of jack-o'-lanterns. So they're like, hey, come with us, bring the jack-o'-lanterns. And you kind of expect, hey, they're probably going to be bullying this child. So that does wind up happening eventually. Then we cut to a couple hooking up in an alleyway, and there's a guy in a mask. You see he has some like vampire teeth. So he winds up biting the girl, and you have the girl like crawling away, and she's like all bloody. She runs into the couple that we saw at the beginning of the movie. So at that point in time, we know there's kind of a time switch here because that couple, that woman already died. And the guy's like, hey, leave her alone, she's just drunk. Because if you look around, there's other people who are all bloody who are drinking. It's fair for him to assume that that's probably what's going on with this woman. But then the guy in the mask comes up and he winds up killing her and like leaves her on the bench. And people, I guess, just assume she's passed out drunk, but she's dead. So then we get more backstory on like the nerdy girl who's wearing the witch costume. She's like super into Halloween when she's talking to this kid who's dressed up as a pirate. The kids go to the cliff, and the one girl who seems to be like the popular girl, she tells this story of this like legend of the school bus. And there's a group of kids who were like really troublesome. Their parents put them on the school bus, and they told the bus driver, hey, we'll pay you if you pretty much kill our kids and drive the bus off a cliff. So he accepts that opportunity, takes him to the cliff, and he's like has them all chained up. I don't know how the one kid's not chained up, but one kid escapes away and starts the car and drives it off the cliff. So they go off with the bus driver. We have the girl telling the story mentioned the bus driver was never seen again, but we see the footage of the guy coming out of the water. So we see the bus driver is alive. So that's a bit of foreshadowing there. They wind up going over to this elevator thing, which is like an old school, like very rusty barred elevator that goes down into this like lagoon type thing where this event happened. She's like, only 3 people can go at a time, which feels like made up obviously, but she has a reason for saying that. So they go down, and then we cut to a different group. So we see the Little Red Riding Hood trying to find a match. She's like looking at different people, and they're all taken, like this person's with somebody else, this person's actually a woman. So She's having a hard time finding who she wants to be with. Then we return to the kids. The pirate stays in the elevator. He's like, hey, I'm super freaked out because the kids are making a lot of scary noises. The nerdy witch walks out and sees the bus, and she sees the mask there. She winds up getting grabbed from the ground from somebody, and it looks like these like zombie monsters are coming after her. She runs away. She sees somebody getting their stomach like ripped out or whatever, and she freaks out, falls down, and they wind up laughing. It's the kids playing a trick on her. They were pretending to be this creepy thing that she told the story of. One of the guys is like super nice. He's like comforting her like, hey, we were just messing with you, don't worry. And it felt like he had a good intention overall. One of the friends also asks the popular girl, hey, where'd you come up with this story? And she's like, no, this is actually a thing. That's why there's actually a bus there, and that's why all this stuff's here. So she was telling the truth. She just didn't believe this created some kind of realistic zombie kids rising up and attacking them. So they go over there. Turns out these things are real. So they start coming out of the ground and attacking them. They all run back to the elevator, and the nerdy girl in the witch outfit is in the elevator, and the door's closed, and they're all like freaking out, like, let us in. And she winds up grabbing the keys, and then she's like, nah, and she pushes the up button. Elevator starts to go up. I'll mention this again later, but one of the criticisms I did have was that the elevator was like these bars. So if you were on the outside, even if you couldn't get in the elevator, you could step on it and hold on to the bars and go up with it as it's going up. So that's a little bit of a nitpick I would have, because I get that they couldn't get in, but there would be a way for them to go up with the elevator even without being inside of it. So either way, she goes up by herself, and they all get mauled by these creatures, these like kids that are just these monsters at this point. She goes up, she sees Sam. I think this may be the first time, or one of the first couple times that we do see Sam here, and we see him there, and he's kind of just like, yeah, I approve. So they're on the same page. Then we cut to the guy in the mask who is interested in the Little Red Riding Hood, and he's trying to flirt with her and get with her. He winds up biting her, it seems. And then we cut to the group of girls, and they're talking about like, oh, where's she at? She's like the little runt of the group. She can't take care of herself. And we see this Little Red Riding Hood outfit drop from like this tree, I think. They go up to look at it, and it's the guy in the mask who's like freaking out. She comes out, and she's like super confident and just talking down to this guy. We see that his leg's like broken, and he's just super injured. We find out all of these girls are actually werewolves. So kind of a twist here. Some of it could have been obvious. Like, she takes off his teeth, so he's wearing one of those like fake plastic vampire teeth. I don't know how, when he was like biting people earlier, how they would have actually like bit into people, unless maybe it wasn't the plastic ones, maybe it was something stronger, but she takes those out. So he's not a vampire. He was just dressing up and acting like this. And we find out this is Stephen Wilkins. This is the principal from earlier. He mentioned he was going on a date to his son, so this is what he was really doing. He was going out at night, dressing up and trying to get with girls and kill them in really sadistic ways. But the tables have turned on him, and the werewolves are now attacking. They're just ripping everyone to shreds, and they're like taking their skin off even. The main girl doesn't, but there's like a lot of them when they're just looking like a werewolf directly. And she kind of mocks him. She says the line that he said to her earlier, I think, and says something like, my, what big eyes you have. The Little Red Riding Hood statement, and bites him and kills the principal there. So that guy who was ultimately a bad guy meets his demise there. Then we have some kids go to this old man's house, and the dog chases them away. He goes out to find a bunch of lit jack-o'-lanterns everywhere, and he's like, what is going on? Grabs his gun, searches the house to try to find what is going on here. He goes up to his one room where he sees the room covered in blood that says something like, trick or treat, give me something good to eat, all over the place. There's a jack-o'-lantern that's like lit on fire. He gets stabbed in the leg by Sam, who's underneath his bed. Sam then pops out a candy bar with a blade in it. So he shoots at him and shoots the jack-o'-lantern behind him, and it kind of blows up. The old man stumbles away at that point. He's like falling, and he falls down the stairs. He lands on a bunch of like glass and blades. So he's all kinds of cut up at this point. The old man's trying to leave from his front door. He's like trying to unlock it. We see Sam crawling from the ceiling, coming towards him. The old man looks up and he jumps down on top of him. We also have a repeat scene of earlier where we saw this guy from the principal's perspective yelling outside of his window. And it's kind of a cool, we see the other side of it here where the old man is yelling at the principal. The principal doesn't care to help him, but this is what's going on when this takes place. So once again, another time shift that's kind of occurring here. You have the old man eventually rip off the mask of Sam, and he's like this hideous looking creature underneath. Sam winds up biting his leg. Man shoots Sam like point blank right in the head and blasts him across the room. Then he goes close to Sam and he shoots him in the chest twice. He definitely doesn't risk leaving Sam alive. He hits him 3 times with bullets with the shotgun. So feels like Sam has taken a lot of damage at this point. He goes to the phone to try to call the police. The cord winds up getting cut, and then he gets stabbed in the leg by Sam's hand. So somewhere along the way, Sam's hand got cut off and stabbed him. The hand goes over to Sam himself, and Sam wakes up. and then Sam's hand reattaches to him. Then Sam gets up, puts on his mask, bites a lollipop that he has in his bag, so it's like sharp on the edge now, and he's approaching the old man. The old man grabs like a bottle, breaks it, he's ready to attack. Sam whacks that out of his hand. Then Sam winds up his sucker that's like cut in a way that is sharp and could do damage to this old guy. He swings down at him. Similar to earlier when we had the principal stabbing and we weren't sure what he was doing with his son, we have this kind of look towards it, and we see the old man's not dead. There's a candy bar that he's holding at his chest that Sam hit with the lollipop. Sam grabs that out of his hand and takes a bite of it. And then he just goes to the door and walks away. So here's the part, upon watching it for the first time, I was like, why did he just leave him there? It seemed kind of funny, but it didn't make a whole lot of sense until I learned these are the rules of Halloween, where he got given a Halloween candy, so he accepts this old man. Is like, you know what, you're good. You gave me candy. You followed the Halloween tradition. So he leaves at that point. Then we cut to the fireplace where there's a photo of the kids that were mentioned in the story with the bus driver, and there's just the kids with the bus, and we learn this old man is the bus driver that survived. So the guy living next door to the principal is the bus driver from earlier. He winds up like totally bandaging himself up. He gets like trick-or-treaters, opens the door, gives them candy, and one of them's like, hey, great mummy costume, when he's like clearly just super injured. He's just like, all right, whatever. And then we kind of get a recap of some of the cast that we've seen from earlier, at least the ones that are alive at this point. The next door neighbor's kid is giving out candy. Then we see the nerdy witch with like a wagon. She's walking in front of this car that stops immediately that has all of the werewolf girls in it. And then we see Sam out front staring at the old man. And then we hear the couple from the very beginning of the movie. They're walking home, and we have the one girl blow out the jack-o'-lantern and say she's going to bring down the decorations for Halloween. So that's the inciting incident from the very beginning, where because she blew out the jack-o'-lantern, she's taking the decorations down. Sam is frustrated and he's going to ultimately kill her. But that's kind of a cool full circle from the night. We got the ending at the beginning that we came back to at the end again. And we end the movie with the monster kids who killed the real kids at that elevator with the girl in the witch costume. They're at the door of the old man, who's the bus driver, and they ring the doorbell. He opens it. We get some kind of cartoony animations here, but the impression is they killed the old man because he was the bus driver who was ultimately the one that was going to kill them and kind of wound up killing him. I guess you could say that one kid kind of did it, but he was there intending to do it regardless. That's how the movie ends. Not necessarily the most holistic ending, but once again, I'm not really sure if this is targeted towards kids or it may just be more of an adult type film where there's some Halloween fun. As I mentioned at the very beginning, this is a movie that upon first watch I wasn't a big fan of, but I enjoyed it a lot more the second time. Going through some pros and cons. As far as pros, I don't have a whole lot I want to mention here. It definitely has great Halloween vibes. This is a movie you want to watch potentially on Halloween or the night before, definitely around the Halloween season. I'm not sure this is a movie I would watch really any other time of the year, because there are horror movies that you probably watch during October, but there's also ones that are just kind of Halloween specific. This is in that category. I don't think this is a movie I would watch any month outside of October, and that's just because that's kind of the theme of the movie, and it works for that. Also really cool having the interwoven story with a mixed timeline. First time watching it, I didn't really love it because it felt like you weren't really invested in any characters, but upon second watch, seeing the moving parts that take place and recycling through different scenes and knowing Sam's real purpose and what matters to him makes more sense why certain things happen the way they happen. As far as cons, some of these may be criticisms that are probably a little bit over the top. When it comes to the purpose of this movie, it's meant to be a fun movie. It's not supposed to be taken super seriously, but I'll point some out. First one being the heavier kid that dies with the principal from eating the candy bar that had a blade in it. Nobody sees him die, despite shortly after that, the streets being full of kids. I'm not sure how nobody would have been around when that took place, but we'll accept that as being the case. Then we have his son who came back, who was, I guess, trick-or-treating by himself. Would he really have had him do that? I don't know. I guess he wasn't the best father, so it's maybe reasonable that he sent his son out to trick-or-treat by himself. I wasn't the kid in the back screaming. It presumably wasn't the heavier kid that got killed because his head was cut off. Maybe the other kid has his mouth taped shut. We don't really know, but that explains that potentially. The big one where the kids died because the elevator went up without them, I definitely think they should have grabbed on, because that would have been an easy way for them to get out of there despite not being inside the elevator. And then the last one, when Steve, the principal, was biting people with his fake teeth, I would have assumed those would have been like those fake plastic teeth that you get from the store. So I'm not sure how he was really biting people that was making them bleed. But if we want to say maybe they were sharper, maybe they weren't the ones you would get from some party store, that's really the only explanation I could give there for that making sense. but that's once again probably a bit of a nitpick. I definitely like this one a lot more upon rewatch than I originally did, and I think it's a good Halloween film. It's one where overall I thought Sam was overrated as a Halloween icon. That may be a hot take to say, but it's how I felt originally. I think it makes more sense now. I do appreciate him as a Halloween mascot because he does live out the Halloween tradition. He follows the rules of Halloween that I mentioned earlier. It makes sense, and I definitely enjoyed it more this time. So overall, I think I'm going to give this one an above average after watching it a second time. I'm glad I did because I would have probably said it was somewhere below average. But we'll be kind here. We'll say this one gets a 6 out of 10. So not super above average, but it's definitely a lot better than I thought originally. I imagine maybe you could even go from here. What are your thoughts? Is Trick or Treat something that you really love as a Halloween film? Is it your go-to Halloween film overall? If not, what is? We'd love to see your thoughts on just Halloween films as a whole, or just your thoughts on Trick or Treat. I have heard there's a sequel that's supposedly getting worked on. Hopefully we'll hear more with that. I'm not really sure what the timeline looks like with that, but I'll make sure to keep you guys in the loop as soon as I hear more on that information. I'd love to see more of Sam and the whole Trick or Treat world, getting some more side stories, and it's something you can easily do. It's almost like an anthology because you had, even in this movie, you had 5 different stories that didn't really tie to each other that much. There was some correlation between them, but they independently worked. You can do that again, and I think it'll work just as well. What are your guys' thoughts overall? Are you interested in a sequel? Do you love this film? Any feedback down below? Would just love to see that. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to talk to you again soon.